Please be seated. Well, if Jesus was telling this story in Northwest Indiana to a crowd of gardeners, I suspect it wouldn't be birds stealing seeds. I think it would be Japanese beetles coming and destroying the fruit trees you have very carefully nurtured year after year and eating their leaves to skeletons. I love to garden. I'm not sure if I'm any good at it. I garden by trial and error with lots and lots of error, but every year the seed catalogs come in February. And February is the bleakest month if you are a displaced Californian. And they have these little packets they want to sell you, little packets of hope that someday the sun will shine. And so they entice me successfully year after year with that one perfect variety of tomato that you can't get from any other source, that someone's Russian grandmother brought carefully with them over on a boat to the U.S., and you can have it for the price of $5 for this little packet of 15 seeds. And I'm desperate in February, so I hand over my money. And then usually about Good Friday is the time that I'm down in the basement getting the fluorescent lights and the little heating mat going and very carefully putting the little yellow strawberries and Russian tomatoes and that one weird variety of lettuce that I just had to try carefully into their little cells so that they will grow. And then my whole family laughed at me this year because I decided I needed to collect milk jugs and cut out the bottoms and try to make little miniature greenhouses because I wanted to get things into the dirt a little sooner. And the truth is, with all of the careful tending and all of the transplanting, I never know. I never know what is going to grow from one year to the next. I just put it all in there and hope. Garlic that accidentally got weed whacked about 3 years ago when I didn't explain that it wasn't just tall grass, kind of naturalized and now kind of comes up every year, and you can always get a few heads of garlic out of the corner of the yard. Tomatoes that were so carefully tended last year died on the vine, all of them. It was too wet, there was something, and nothing was good. In the wild jungle of tomatoes, nothing was good. But blackberries that had been mediocre for years produced a bumper crop, and I could not keep up with them and had to throw the whole thing in the freezer until I could deal with it around Thanksgiving. I never know. So this is the season when I come back into the house after a daily battle with Japanese beetles, after daily tending to the tomatoes to get them up into their cages where they belong, and the kids say, "You smell like tomato plants, Mom." This is the season for these stories that Jesus tells. And I may not have deliberately planned my travel so that I'd be back for these weeks, but it worked out nicely because these are the stories for me. These are the stories that resonate with me. And I don't know about you, but I've heard the parable of the sower an awful lot. I hear this story, and it's one that's colorful, it sticks in our minds, and maybe your experience with it is like mine. When I hear it, I am inclined to think about myself and to wonder about the quality of my soil. And I am aware that I should be on the lookout for birds, and I should watch out for those thorns that creep in, and how I should want to be good soil. And we know this, right? We know how quickly hopeful shoots of faith can wither in our lives. We know how good desires to be rooted in God's love are challenged by all the things that want our love and flash and shine and grab at us. So it's not unreasonable that we would be thinking about ourselves as we read this parable, but here's the problem. Dirt can't change itself. Dirt just is. And inasmuch as I am a part of the soil of this earth, I cannot begin to make myself ready to receive the good news. I cannot pull my own weeds. I cannot will myself into being good soil. Soil cannot just up and change itself. So if this parable is about the soil and how some of it is right and some of it is wrong, not much good news. Thing is, Jesus tells parables mostly to tell us about who God is. Jesus tells parables mostly to give us a picture of what the kingdom of God is about. And so if we start looking at this story and wondering about what it tells us who God is, we see things a little different. Because that sower doesn't make a lot of sense. That sower does not have a packet of 15 seeds that he needs to carefully, one per cell and nurture it. He has some kind of giant pouch and he's just throwing, right? He's throwing it in every direction. He knows there's a path. He's not dumb. He knows there's a path. This is his land. He knows that part over there is a little bit rocky. He doesn't skip it. Just keeps throwing. Just keeps throwing. Again and again. Handful after handful. Flinging seed in every direction without regard to the merit of the soil. Isaiah said, "My ways are not your ways," as he spoke for God. My ways are not your ways. It is not necessarily going to make sense to you, the kingdom of God. And the other thing is that this sower is confident. He seems confident in the seed's ability to do what it's supposed to do. My word that goes out from my mouth shall not return to me empty. And maybe that's because this sower has seen it happen again and again, that when it takes root, it's ridiculously fruitful. 30 times, 60, 100, that is ridiculous. 10 times would have been a bumper crop. This is beyond productive. But even in good soil, it's funny that it's not predictable, right? It's not like, and when it works, you're going to get 75% all the time. When it works, sometimes you get 30 times. Sometimes it's 100. No explanation for why. You don't get to pick. It just happens. That's one of the reasons that I love to garden. It reminds me how very little is in my control. I can water, but I cannot stop the deluge from falling from the sky and ruining my tomatoes. I can pick off bugs, but I cannot reach the high branches. I can put seeds in the dirt, and they don't sprout. They sit there, and then the next year, when I've got another plan for that corner, up comes the Swiss chard that I expected last year. I do not have control of how this goes. The kingdom of heaven is not governed by our sense of how things should be done. Don't waste seeds on bad soil. Don't waste seeds on, areas where there's competition. The sower doesn't seem to work that way at all. Not about to withhold the seed from someone just because they seem unlikely. And the kingdom of heaven, thanks be to God, is such that it surprises us. When it takes root and springs up, it multiplies to cover more than any other inadequacies, multiplying grace and mercy with more than enough to go around. And so as Jesus is telling this story and he's looking disciples in the eye that he is going to send out and say, go spread the seed, go be signs of my love in the world. And he knows what it looks, Jesus is the seed. He knows what it looks like to seem like failure, right? Jesus gets rooted in this life and grows up onto a cross. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, does not look fruitful, doesn't look like there's any hope. And yet Jesus knows that the kingdom operates completely differently. So then when he sends out the disciples, he knows some things are gonna go gangbusters, some things are going to be really rough. We know in our own lives we're a mixture of rocks and birds and thorns and good soil all tossed together. But the power of the seed, of this love of God that gets flung about, is such that it's going to surprise us. The last thing I thought about as I sat with this story is that while soil can't change itself, the thing that improves it is dead stuff. Right? If I want my garden to be productive, I need to truck on down to the compost that they give you for free at the city and just spread it. And that's all I need to do. I don't need to till anything. I don't need to pour anything on there. Just spread the dead stuff. And year after year, things come up. And so I wonder about that crummy soil. You sow year after year, don't you? And if enough things fail to take root and die and come back again and again, eventually there's going to be some soil there. So I don't know that that's necessarily what Jesus intended, but I do know that God is not the sort to give up. Thanks be to God.